Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Rock Debate Club number 2. Guys, this is our turn to have a lot of fun and bring up some of the biggest discussions that rock has ever had. And this is going to be a fun one tonight, Bill. We got Metallica versus Megadeth. What are your thoughts?
Oh, this is an argument that has been going on pretty much since like 1985. You know, I mean,
Since,
obviously there's a common lineage between the two bands. Dave Mustaine, who started Megadeth, started his career with Metallica and got kicked out of the band for various reasons, probably not the least of which is he and James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich didn't get along all that well.
yeah.
Um, but both bands are very successful bands in their own right. I mean, Metallica, of course, is a huge band in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They've sold about 140 million albums worldwide. Megadeth doesn't get the press that Metallica does, but they're not a slouch either. They've sold about 40 million albums.
Yeah, oh yeah.
They have some classic ones out there as well. So both bands have their fans. They have some detractors too, but um, neither of these bands deserves anything but respect as far as what they've accomplished. There's just a lot of bad blood between them.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, this is my just one shout out to our sponsor, Rosenfeld Dental Associates, located 1095 Inman Avenue in Edison, New Jersey. Go rock your smile with the Rock Doc David Rosenfeld, nominated one of the top dentists 2022. Guys, this is your chance to have your voice shared as well. So make sure that if you're watching, go ahead and add into the comments. We already have Bill, somebody else showing for Metallica. So we got one vote
Anonymously.
for Metallica in already. Another Ola. Hello. I'm trying to keep up the best that I can with the live feed. That was an Ola from Pat Shoemaker of Sick Vicky. How are you, Pat? But guys, it is my honor and pleasure to bring on to discuss this topic as well. This is Mark Alred from Closer to Deth. Hey, Mark, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This is awesome.
So I want to talk about. I want to introduce your band a little bit before we get started on this whole conversation. So tell us a little bit about Closer to Deth, how long you guys have been together and that sort of thing.
So we started in right before the pandemic, just about 2019-ish, late 2019. So the way it played out, Pete, our drummer, he's kind of like our main focal point. He and Joe, our other guitar player, they got together and they wanted to do a King's X cover band. And so they were like, did a couple jams because they're both obviously big fans of King's X. And they were struggling a little bit to get some vocals in there. And well, then the one time apparently Joe starts ripping into some lead parts or some rhythm parts from something off the Rust in Peace album from Megadeth. And Pete's like, hey, is that Megadeth? And Joe's like, I happen to have just learned the whole Rust in Peace album back in the day when I was learning how to play guitar. And so they started jamming it, and I had met at a church deal. Like I play in a band at church, and Pete had come to see that. And one time, like we were talking afterwards, and he's like, "Hey man, like you like Megadeth perchance?" And so I was like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "Well, I'll keep you in mind if ever anything comes around." Well, then fast forward like 5 years, 6 years or something, and so Pete texts me out of the blue and says, "Hey, would you be interested in doing rhythm and lead vocals for a Megadeth cover band? We're trying to recreate the Rust in Peace album." Would I? You mean the job that I was born to fill? Like I was like, yes, I would. So, kind of just came together from there. We went through for bass. And like Pete and I and Joe really clicked real well. And then a couple of folks for bass, and then now we landed on this guy, Jason Miller, who's just he's a a force of nature, as we would say. He's a beast on the bass guitar. So we've been jamming ever since. It was funny because our first show that we were scheduled to play was in March of 2020, which you can see where this is going.
Oh
We
boy!
set up a local bar in on March 13th, which was literally the day that they shut the world down in central Pennsylvania. So they shut everything down, and unfortunately didn't reopen. So several gigs since then, but it was a rocky start, but we got lots of time to rehearse together. That was cool. So, but yeah, we just been jamming for a while and just really loving adding to the song list every so often and loving the Megadeth.
So we have another person that pulled up. This is actually Danny McKnight from Crown of Earth. He's in the Megadeth camp. We have people commenting constantly now, and again from Pat Shoemaker, I love King Zach as the captaining person. King Zach is the way, yeah. But guys, let me preface this by saying I think we all have respect for Metallica. We all enjoy what they at one time brought to the table. I think we represent a lot of what is Metallica's fan base. Is we really relish in the older stuff, some of the younger stuff, the Cliff Burton stuff. Dave Mustaine honestly being credited on the first two albums, which were probably two of the very best that Metallica ever put out. But we kind of went the other way. We kind of went to Megadeth because Metallica started getting very commercial. Bill, what are your thoughts on the whole thing?
Well, I think you summed it up pretty well. I mean, in all fairness, I really didn't get into Metallica right out of the gate when they started out. I first really caught onto that wave with the Justice album, and then went both backward and forward from there. I picked up on the Black Album. I picked up on both Master of Puppets and on Ride the Lightning. And the thing that struck me, obviously, was it was very much like it was two different bands. The Cliff era was so totally different and so
absolutely.
Musical from the perspective that Cliff was a virtuoso on the bass. He knew music theory. He knew how to craft songs. And Lars and James hadn't really gotten there yet. They were good lyricists, but they weren't really great musicians. I would argue, actually, but that's another story. With Megadeth, James and the bands Dave, I should say, and the bands he put together were very technically skilled right out the gate. They weren't necessarily writing the very strongest songs out of the gate, but the technical structure of the songs and the musicianship was outstanding and remained outstanding through the 80s and up until Rust in Peace and beyond. So when Metallica changed their scope in 1991 with the Black Album and became more album-oriented rock, in a way, for me at least, it wasn't a surprise because they weren't really capable of going any further with thrash than they had with Cliff gone and with Dave gone.
Mark, what are your thoughts on the whole thing?
I kind of like I definitely I would say as far as Megadeth, I'm just kind of all the way through their catalog. Like I don't know that there's been. I mean, Risk was a little little iffy. Yeah. So, but I mean, as a buddy of mine pointed out, it's a great album in its own right, but it's not really a Megadeth album like what we would think of. So like the Megadeth catalog, it's kind of waxed and waned a little bit as of the 2000s and beyond. It's kind of taken some turns that I haven't been super fond of, but it is what it is. If you're making 16 albums, you're gonna have some that are not your best offerings. But for Metallica, I mean the old school stuff. Definitely. I was not a huge fan. Interestingly enough, the Kill 'Em All album is probably my least favorite Metallica album. However, like after that, when they started to really like like set their sound on a better level, like on, you know, Ride the Lightning and Puppets and that sort of thing. I got into it, and I like some of the more melodic stuff from Metallica as well as Megadeth. Like the crash is great. Don't get me wrong, and the speed is you know, awesome. But the some of the melodic stuff, that a little more of their musical prowess, I think, in some cases, especially in Megadeth, where, you know, I mean, some of these solos, like, just like Dave is Dave. He does his lead stuff, and it's usually super fast and like, you know, as speedy and as many notes as you can get into a certain, and he's got like his go-to patterns every so often. But like Marty's stuff and now Kiko's stuff is just like the lead parts, and I feel bad for my guitar player Joe, who's got to pick those things up and try to emulate them, but he does an awesome job. It's just you know, it's so, yeah, I mean, I've had my ups and downs with both bands, really.
Talking about the melodic rock, I got to say one of my favorite Megadeth albums that I believe is not as thrashy but very melodic would be Euthanasia. I love the Euthanasia album. Every track on that album is a banger, and it's not one of those really fast up and thrashing. I mean, you got a Tula Maud on there. You have Family Tree. You got some really powerful stuff on there, but I don't think it's as thrashy as some of their stuff.
No, it's not. And Dave even mentions in his book about how he felt a little like out of like element when they started doing like Euthanasia. It was just like not what he was used to up till that point. So, but I dig it. I love Euthanasia. That's one of my favorite albums of theirs.
So once again, gentlemen, one vote for Metallica, one vote for Dave, and somebody else agreeing with us that Euthanasia is a masterpiece.
The guys writing in, tell us why.
Yeah, exactly. Inform us. What makes Metallica or Megadeth your go-to? Why? What makes you guys agree with that? And especially for Metallica, because we need somebody on the other end of things. We're big Megadeth fans. And Metallica, I mean, like we said, we love the early Metallica, but we can only do so much with Load and Reload and Scream for Suicide, which is the new one. And I mean, some good stuff, but it's not what it was. And somebody else put the greatest Megadeth album, according to me, and Dave Mustaine, from what I heard him say, was Countdown to Extinction. Another great album. Let me unmute. Mark, I wanted to make sure I had you unmuted. Good. Sorry about that.
My bad.
What do you think of Countdown to Extinction? Another classic, great album.
One that kind of got me Death to begin with. Like, it, I mean, I hate to be like, you know, I'm Mr. Commercial guy, but like Destruction, hearing that for the first time, I was like, oh my, this is something special. Well, then I did that album, and then sort of did the backtracking thing. Like, immediately after that was Rust in Peace for me. In interest, I kind of went backwards in time and saw their earlier stuff and just loved it. But yeah, Symphony. And now it's funny because I can barely stand to play that song live. I'm so sick.
I'm sure you've played it a million times.
Yeah, people love it, and it's like we always in the set list because it's like people just love that song. So because it's a great riff, it's a great song.
Question for you, Mark. As far as playing the music with your band is concerned, yeah, you mentioned earlier, and this is something that strikes me as far as Megadeth is concerned also. Dave is obviously the constant, but there have been a lot of lineup changes over the years. As far as the music is concerned, do you find it different in style in any way, or are there challenges, for example, when you're playing some of the music that Marty played versus what other guitar players have done?
That would definitely be a question for the other guy in the boat, and Joe, who plays he has to like shoulder all the lead, the true lead parts. Like, so, I mean, thankfully for me, because Dave's the constant, I've been like like if there's gonna be that I have to learn, it's gonna be Dave's solo. Like I won't need to go into Marty's stuff, or because I mean, like Joe can around me on a constant basis, and so he's definitely fit for that position. But and it's the same with Dave. Like I know Dave has mentioned before, like he picks guitar players that can like seriously outplay him just because like he knows that it'll add a lot to the band, and so he doesn't attempt to get into that vein. But we've like the newest stuff that we've done, I would say definitely there's a difference in the soloing, not from my perspective, listening to the tracks. Like the newest song we just learned was Head Crusher, or like that we've been trying to put on as Head Crusher, and that was off of in 2014. What was it? The End Game, I think. And so we just sort of are adding that to our repertoire. But listening to Chris Broderick's solo at the end of that song versus like some of Marty's stuff. I mean, Broderick is a phenom, his own right, and but Marty is like, I mean, Marty's Marty. He's never going to be topped when it comes to the ability to a lead part to a rhythm part that Dave up with that is just like. It's almost like you can, if you hear enough Marty Friedman, you can pick him out of a crowd. Like if you were to play,
absolutely
10 different licks, you can hear Marty's because he uses such like unique scales and stuff like that. So
we got a 2-part from Josh. And guys, if you're not logging in through StreamYard, this is the best way to present yourself because it lets us know who you are. Josh from PA. Megadeth has been true to themselves and never allowed others to dictate their direction like Slayer or Anthrax. Even so, when Megadeth went back to their thrash roots, they didn't crash and burn like Metallica did with Saint Anger or any other attempt at going back to being thrash. Megadeth stayed true to the fans. What do you guys feel about that? Any thoughts to that?
I can't disagree at all.
Yeah,
No,
I mean, Saint Anger, I mean, if you look at some of the brand new Megadeth stuff that just dropped, it is phenomenal. I think Dave is still got it. He hasn't lost touch, I believe, at all. And when you hear stuff like Cry for Suicide, to me, it's a little bit overproduced. It's a little overpackaged. And it's a studio masterpiece. It's not like something I don't know if they could get away with doing live and sound close to the album.
Yeah.
And then we have Dave from Crown of Earth saying, Ashes in Your Mouth displays the best dual guitar harmonies ever. Nick Menza, God rest his soul, had the best dual guitar drum bass breakdown ever. Any thoughts to that song, guys?
Yeah, that one was one that we added like real early. I think that's probably my second favorite Megadeth song. Like the first one has got to be Holy Wars, just because that's Holy Wars. But Ashes in Your Mouth, I've loved that song ever since I heard it off of Down and So like early on in the setup, I was like, man, we got to do Ashes, and we done it, and that he's right, that harmony part, oh, that's something to behold. But I love playing that with Joe, and when we nail it, it's like the angels are singing.
And here we got a band like Megadeth. When I saw Megadeth, I saw them on the last time I saw them was on the Dystopia tour, and they were with Metal Church. I believe it was Butcher Babies, and it was a smaller. It was an amphitheater that usually does lawn seats, but it was in the middle of the winter, so they closed the lawn seats off. And so it made the inside rather small. It makes me wonder with Metallica that's constantly doing stadium shows and constantly doing football arenas and things along those lines, as opposed to why Megadeth has always stayed like this smaller venue type deal. And we talked a little bit before we came on as far as an opening act now for certain bands. And why do you feel like there's been that distinction between Metallica, who seems to be like this corporate machine, and Megadeth, who seems like this smaller type band? Any ideas?
think that like with Megadeth, I think that unfortunately their fan base has always been a much more focused group. Like grab somebody out of a crowd, and they'll like if you played a Metallica song for them, they'd probably be like, oh yeah, or I love Metallica, or like the kids nowadays, like the 12-year-old girls wearing the AC/DC shirts and stuff, where they never couldn't name a single song from them, but like so it's like the name recognition almost. Whereas Megadeth never really had that because they didn't like. I know Dave's a good businessman, but he was never like the like this type businessman where he could
right.
pull money out of the stone, like so. But so I think that, and I know that with Metallica, a lot of people want to see them, so a lot of people are willing to pay for these big arenas and these big venues, and they do put on like a show. Like when I saw Megadeth, they had like the screens, like the LED screens and stuff like that, but Megadeth's focus has always been on the music rather than the performance in the show. Like they try to focus on being able to play those riffs that they wrote, like play them well and make it sound like the album. And Metallica, I'm sure, tries that, but they incorporate the show and getting the crowd involved. So, in their own right, they're both kind of, because I like to go to a concert where like the band is like doing and performing, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So
what do you think, Bill?
I think a lot of it, as far as Megadeth is concerned, is that in this day and age, there really isn't much of an outlet through mass media to hear their music. I mean, it used to be back in the 80s and in the early 90s, they did a lot of work with MTV, Headbangers Ball and such. They never really got radio airplay, and that was one thing that Metallica made sure they got, starting with the Black Album. Megadeth hasn't gone for lack of trying to build a mass audience. One thing I learned from some of the research I did getting ready for the show, one of their managers back a number of years ago was a gentleman named Bud Prager. Bud Prager was a mega manager in the 70s and 80s, managing bands like Mountain and Foreigner. So he knew how to build a mass audience for a band that could deliver it. The problem I think that Megadeth had was that there really wasn't a place where they could, beyond the early 90s, there really wasn't a place where they could deliver the music to a mass audience to be able to make that happen. And it's unfortunate because the music is great.
Now, what I believe is, we've seen Metallica go through these big corporate issues. We've seen everything from Napster to the ridiculousness of giving tribute bands cease and desist letters to like the corporation that is known as Metallica. And Megadeth never quite seemed to really care so much, as long as our music was out there, as long as they were being heard. It's just like we have somebody putting forth Megadeth, superior musicians, fact. And to me, that really says a lot. That is exactly the difference between Metallica and Megadeth, is the musicianship.
Well, let me just put it out there. When Metallica started, they had Dave Mustaine, they had Cliff Burton. Interestingly, Metallica became the mega corporation after those two guys were gone.
Yeah. Yep. Now, do you feel that Napster, how do you think the fans reacted towards Napster? I mean, we're so far past that now. We're 20, 25 years past Napster now. We're doing Spotify. Bands are being heard on Spotify. If Napster did anything, they showed that we have the technology to be able to stream music.
Oh, no doubt.
It's just, I think people started nitpicking Lars. And don't get me wrong, I think Lars is probably one of the biggest douches in rock. But it feels like all that mess that Metallica seems to throw themselves into kind of gives them that persona. How do you guys feel about that? Do you think it's, am I right?
I remember at the time of the Napster issues coming up, I remember my initial reaction was Metallica are superstars, they're multimillionaires, and here they are worried about losing. Now, let's be frank, Lars was legally right. The music was being stolen. But there were ways that they could have dealt with it instead of the way they did. I think that was really the thing that turned me off. And what bothered me in a similar vein to that was it wasn't like Metallica was above, you know, leveraging other people's work and changing it a little and calling it their own. They certainly did some of that with the music that Dave wrote when he was in the band. I mean, Four Horsemen is effectively Dave's song, for heaven's sake. And we talked a little bit amongst us before we went on air. There are some songs in the Metallica catalog that are very obviously derived from other hard rock and metal songs that I know I could name at least two. So for Lars to cry poverty, if you will, because of Napster, that really just seems so strange and so petty, I thought.
You know, what I feel one of my biggest problems with the whole Napster thing was that they turned over so many different people's names. Not the people from Napster names that they're turning over, but they're turning over fans' names. They're turning over people that want to listen to their music. And like you said, Bill, I agree with you 100%, is they didn't go about it the right way. Instead of trying to throw the fans under the bus, it felt like they should have went more after Napster than the people that were trying to get their music. Yep. Danny, you guys will enjoy this comment. If my mouse will work with me. He says, I wonder if the fact that Dave Mustaine was angry, dickhead, drunk set him back. I have firsthand experience with Dave, and Ellison said ignore him when I was about 17 years old. So, you know, Dave has had his history of being Dave, and I mean nobody can take that.
Yeah, he's Dave. And like it's you know, looking at all the turnover of different musicians in the band and stuff like that. Like I know that there are some people that click with Dave and they click with the, you know, with his style, I guess you could say, but you know, I can imagine it would be hard. Like if you're getting into the music and you get an offer to come play for Megadeth, like that's a big deal. And so like Chris Broderick or like Kiko now, and to say like, of course nobody's going to pass that up, but then like you look at like Glenn Drover and Al Pitrelli when they banned for all of like 20 minutes, you know, they made like one album and they got out of there. But so, you know, I'm sure it's hard sometimes to deal with a personality like Dave's. And, you know, so in that regard, I don't know that I could blame the guys from Metallica when they gave him the boot back, and you know, it turned best for the best because we got Megadeth and Metallica out of the whole thing. And so, you know, that been a different story. We wouldn't be, you know, talking today. It wouldn't be the Clash of the Titans sort of a deal. But, yeah. I mean, Dave's definitely got his thing. What's funny is I'm looking at like when I was watching the, I think it's called some kind of monster, the Metallica thing when they're making the album together. And I've always thought that Kirk Hammett was just kind of a little weaselly little guy, just like, and this was prior to seeing that video. But then when he like him interacting with the guys, I'm like, dude, Kirk's the only one that's like sane in that band. He's the only one that isn't like, right. So he's just like trying to make some music. So, you know, say what you want about playing. He's at least, you know, a little stable to some degree, but you know, so.
Now, on a totally different side of the argument, Josh Wiesen presents this. The death of Metallica was Bob Rock wanting to be Metallica, but needing that Motley Crue money. To me, Lars Ulrich equals Gene Simmons. I mean, that's a good argument. That's a damn good argument. And I mean, you can see the Bob Rock influence as far as I mean, when they started going commercial. Bill, any thoughts to that?
Well, there's no doubt that Bob Rock had a huge influence at the time of the Black Album and immediately following. I mean, the Black Album sold what, 17 million copies? So, Bob Rock was the person who made that happen in a lot of ways. And yeah, I mean, credit where credit is due, I suppose. But one of the things I've always wondered, and maybe it's the idea that people don't want to tamper with success as to why Bob Rock has maintained such a presence with Metallica now for 30 years on and off. But I would think that if Metallica had wanted to grow a little bit or show what they were capable of, that they could have worked with other producers and done other things beyond what they've done. It seems to me, at least, that so much of what Metallica did, especially in the 90s after the Bob Rock success, was to continue to find ways to get themselves on the radio, to make themselves more AOR oriented. So you had the Covers album, you had S&M, which was brilliantly done. But again, that's an outside musician, Michael Kamen, coming in and doing a lot of the work behind the scenes for that. So, I mean, obviously, Metallica has been very successful, but I would have liked to have seen, with that success, them take a little bit more in the way of chances. And I think it speaks to maybe that they're obviously many more records than I ever will, but I really wonder if it just comes down to the talent, if they feel that they really need these other guys to work with them in order to be successful.
So, Mark, he said that to him, Lars already equals Gene Simmons. Do you feel like it's that same kind of corporation?
Yeah, you could certainly make that argument that like Lars is clearly the business end of Metallica, and with his whole mentality. But yeah, I mean, it is clearly working. Like whatever they're I mean, you can look. I mean, what do we say? 140,000 or 140 million albums sold. So it's just like, you go with what works, I guess. And if you're the business to like get out there and I would never begrudge, a band for making money, and for being, that's kind of the ideal for any band. Right. So, when you go to, you think about, like, of course they might have changed their sound over the years and done some stuff maybe not wasn't real popular with their fans, especially like their old school fans. When you're looking at the first few albums, that new fans that brought on board, and then they like go back and they look through the catalog, kind of like what happened with me with Megadeth, looking at hearing Symphony of Destruction and then going back and hearing, being just mesmerized by Rust in Peace, like everybody else was when it first came out, but I just wasn't exposed to it when it first came out. So, and like Baxter thing, I know there was some talk, like Lars was definitely on the right, like the side of right, but then there was also the idea that, like, back in the day they used to like trade tapes, like, so you would get like a demo tape from a band, and then you would like pass it off like, hey, copy this, and you might get a like, after a copy of a copy of a copy, you might get like a tape that's just awful, but it still had the spirit music. So I think that was kind of like the Napster effect, where it got out there, and Lars, whether he knew it or not at the time, was getting publicity for the band. Like it's kind of like Gene Simmons, where he talks about Kiss, every like fifth word out of his mouth is Kiss. So it's like, it might not have been great publicity at the time, but it got people thinking, like, well, what's up with this Metallica stuff? What's going on here? So
once again, John puts out a good point. Just being devil's advocate here, Taylor Swift sells billions of albums. So just the idea that they're selling billions of albums, does that make it a good thing? Does that make it like musically better. I mean, we could go around this argument all day long. Is as far as the musicianship is concerned, as far as does commercialism make one better than another? And I think, like I said before we came on air, we've always had these cases of these bands having these equals, if not betters, and never getting their comeuppance. To me, I gave you guys the example of Ozzy Osbourne. To me, his equal, if not better, is Alice Cooper, and you'll never get that equal. I mean, he'll never get his respect the way that Ozzy did. Ozzy sold all these albums. He sold out everywhere he played. He just won the Grammy for Best Rock Artist this year. It's Meanwhile, Alice is being Alice. Alice is still putting albums out. If you don't know it, it's because he doesn't publicize it as much, or you got to be in the know to kind of know where this stuff is. It's where do we draw the line with commercialism and success, Bill?
Well, let's just be careful here when we talk about commercialism as it pertains to Megadeth. Megadeth has sold over 40 million albums worldwide.
Absolutely.
So it's not like they're unsuccessful or that they've been shunted aside and Metallica is this big juggernaut. Metallica is a juggernaut, but nevertheless, it's not like Megadeth doesn't have their fans and doesn't have their success. It is on a different scale. But it's also done, I think, in a very different way, in a more holistic way, and certainly done through the musicianship and through just sheer force of will on Dave's part. I mean, Dave probably, to the point that you were making earlier, Mark, Dave probably is not necessarily someone I would want to work on an album with. Because I would imagine more than a little bit of a bad. But he also has a vision that he's very, very good at carrying out. I think the thing that I would argue about Hetfield and Ulrich by comparison is I think over the years they've become good songwriters, but it's good in terms of being able to produce product that is consistent with the product they've created before. I don't know that what they're doing is terribly innovative. Maybe they're more like the Taylor Swift.
I mean, for one example is how many bands have lived off the greatest hits, have poured on the greatest hits all their lives. I think of bands like Motley Crue or other bands that are selling out these stadiums. Metallica is still attempting to put out new music, so I got to give them credit for that. At least they're trying to do something new. Whether or not I like it doesn't matter. Whether or not anybody else likes it, it doesn't matter. They're still going to sell out the stadiums that they're selling out. And I give them respect for putting out new music. But it's just, it always burned in the rock community, like putting the two head to head, like we did episode 1. If you guys didn't check it out, go back and check it out after the show, which was Van Halen versus Van Hagar. It's another one of those topics where, you wonder what could have happened. I find it really tragic now and sad that Slayer is broken up, because you'll never see one of these big 4 metal shows again. And I always hope that there will be a return of that. Any ideas?
Well, I got an idea of Big Four show, because we're doing a Big Four tribute show in Mechanicsburg, PA on June 9th. So there's a bunch of like tribute bands that are going to be there. So, I can't recreate Slayer, of course, or, any of that. But yeah, I mean, and it's kind of like it's one of those things, I guess. You get into, the Rolling Stones are the exception to the rule, when you can still tour when you're 56 into this gig, right? So versus like some of the bands that they're you're thinking about like Megadeth getting out there, and I mean Dave's 60 years old, 61 or something, so it takes a toll on them physically, and like it's time sort of a deal. And so like now we got like, the guys from Slayer wanted to retire and call it good, then, it's unfortunate, but it's kind of the way that it's gonna eventually go, the way for everybody, unless we like this rehash of, like, I saw somebody talking a little while back, like if you go to see favorite bands from the 90s or whatever, you're seeing a cover band basically, because you're not rare that you're going to see the same the groups that like still together, like I mean, Metallica is one of those groups, to their credit, they've stuck it together, and they've been, I mean, I know Robert Trujillo like came on board a little bit late in the game, but for the most part, you're looking at the original band. Megadeth, you're down to Dave, which Dave is Megadeth. He always was Megadeth, but at the same time, you're seeing a bunch of musicians that are playing along with Dave when you go see those guys. And even like Slayer, when you lose Jeff Henneman, he's a huge influence songwriter and stuff like that. So, Gary Holt's good in his own right, but it's Henneman. So,
man, I also wanted to touch base, Mark, on that show that you brought up, Mechanicsburg. Are there tickets being sold for that? How do people go about getting those tickets?
There are tickets. Let me pull up my thing here so I can give you the right information. If you go to our Facebook page, you can either go to ours or to it's at Love Drafts in Mechanicsburg, like Love Drafts, like HP Lovecraft, but Love Draft, like is in beers. It's a great venue, by the way. If you haven't ever been there, you guys should check it out. It's so on our Facebook page, which is closer to Deth Band, Deth, like Megadeth, of course. There's some information on there. We also have a show with the Denim and Leather guys who were, they were like, that's coming up April 1st at Love Drafts as well. They were cool enough to invite us to come play with them, and some of their fans apparently told them that we were okay to listen to. So they Jeff Baker reached out to Pete, our guy, our drummer, and said, hey, you guys want to play some shows? So they've been really cool to invite us there. But yeah, the Big Four show is on, it's a Friday night, 9th, starting at 6. It looks like, so FT, which is an Anthrax tribute band. They're going to start out the night, and then we're going to go after them. And then Raining Blood is a Slayer tribute band. And then Obey Your Master is the Metallica.
Great.
What's that?
Obey Your Master is a fantastic band.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to jamming with those guys. So yeah, check it out, June 9th. It starts at 6, it looks like, based on what I can see here. So and then the April 1st show with Denim and Leather, we're going to be opening for them, and that's April 1st, starts at 7:30 at the door. So I think you can get tickets through for the Denim and Leather show, you can get tickets through eventbrite.com. For the Big Four show, that's being put on a MKP booking. So you can either go to the Love Drafts site. You can pay at the door, of course, but it's cheaper if you get it a little bit earlier. So
I'll ask you one favor, Mark. Can you throw that up on the Rock and Roll Union page?
Yeah. You know what? It's fun. I'm actually not on Facebook, but I'll have Pete do it. He's our Facebook administrator guy, so I'll have him throw that up on the Rock and Roll Union page. So thanks for that promo. That's great.
Absolutely.
So we hope to see all you guys out there.
That's what we're here for. We're here to promote you guys, here to talk about all the fun things in rock. Mark, thank you so much for being with us tonight, man. This was an awesome conversation. And
dude, thank you so much.
I'm sure we'll be in touch, my friend.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks. Nice to meet you guys, and great talking to you. And hopefully we can get together again sometime.
Oh,
have a great rest of your week, my friend. Guys, did not mean to kick him off so abruptly. My apologies. But, guys, that was a fun conversation where somebody else had check out my friend Mark's And Night's Rain. Night's Rain is an awesome band. I am very familiar with Night's Rain. Night's Rain goes back to, I go back to Night's Rain with Tim Oliver, who was the original singer of Night's Rain, I believe. But Tim Oliver, who now is the front man for Ancient Mariners, good dude, man. And just wanted to say, man, that was a lot of fun. Bill, any closing thoughts to this whole discussion?
Oh, I think we covered a lot of ground. It was a really great discussion. Looking forward to the next one. What do we have on tap for next month?
We are doing, you're going to love this one. We are doing the Bon Scott versus Brian Johnson. You know, that was something that, you know, people have been asking me for, people have been wanting. So yeah, we're gonna explore that whole thing. I'm gonna see. We're gonna bring on some AC/DC tributes, and we're gonna be discussing that whole animal.
That could be a fun conversation. I know some people are very married to one side or the other.
I'll tell you what. As far as I believe, I think they're both phenomenal singers. I like songs from each band, and so. Somebody said, "Oh, geez, it's like choosing between the two." Indeed, it is. Indeed, it is. I mean, we're gonna have a good time with that. Like I was saying, I like both sides. I love Bon Scott as far as some of that low down, dirty blues that he was able to get into, Night Prowler, and I love Highway to Hell. But then I like Brian Johnson for some of this. It shook me all night long. I couldn't, even though I think Bon Scott wrote that, I can't picture that coming from anyone else but Brian Johnson.
No, I can't either. And Brian definitely put his stamp on the band early and definitely when he joined. But that being said, it is odd for me going back to listening to the live albums, for example, and hearing Brian sing songs like Sin City, which he does well, but it's Bon's
not the
song.
same.
It's always going to be Bon's song.
Exactly right. And, you know, I've seen certain tribute bands out there have a singer for Brian and a singer for Bon. And I think that's the only way that you could really do it because of how vast the difference is. But that's going to be a great conversation. Bill, once again, thank you so much for hanging tonight. And
my pleasure.
So much fun. And this is going to be something, guys, we'll be here at the beginning of March with the Brian Johnson versus Bon Scott debacle. Until next time, don't just leave it better. Have a great night, everybody.